You, if this is in focus, hello. Today, I'm going to be talking about the hard truth of my Balisong collection. I'm on the 0.1 lens today, so might be a little closer than normal, either in my microphone or in the flips themselves. So, when I eventually flip off camera, you can just, I don't know, call me a bozo or something and timestamp in the comments or something. But today I wanted to get into something that I have been struggling to, I think cope is the wrong word, but to acknowledge. And no better time than right now to get into it. So basically it's what I want to flip versus what I should flip. And this comes down to this guy right here. I have the Armshark Tsunami with the DI blade, and this guy flips really good. I love the way its balance is, but that being said, qualities of this knife specifically make it a harder knife to flip. It's harder to perform well on a Tsunami compared to other knives. And what about this is difficult, right? What makes the Tsunami hard to flip? Well, the first most obvious thing is going to be the handles, specifically that they are thinner. Some people have equated flipping this to like flipping chopsticks because it is non-standard in that respect. Additionally, the handle's also rounded, which I know is definitely coming around in the scene, but while that makes fans easier, other tricks it can make harder. And another aspect is obviously that balance that I just mentioned. Yes, it is neutral, but with neutral comes a general difficulty with a lot of tricks. It makes more tricks possible, but it also kind of evens out the playing field. With like a handle bias knife, rollovers and stuff like that are sticky at the sacrifice of fans being harder. You're kind of like min-maxing your stats. Whereas with a neutral balance, you are sacrificing some of the ease of a rollover so that you can have smoother fans and you can accomplish more tricks overall. But it can come with, like I said, the consequences of having that neutral balance and making stuff like the chaplains on this one are pretty sticky, but not as tight as some other handle bias knives that I have, for example. And obviously this guy is titanium with a steel blade, so it is heavier. Now this guy is pretty skeletonized, but even that being said, it is a heavier knife. And that brings us to the last point, which is the non-existent jimping, because this is not doing anything, but tilted to the side you can't see it, and that's because they're cut inwards, and there's not really much grip that is there. So basically it's like you have no jimping. I mean, they say that you have jimping, but it's not actually doing functionally anything for you. And combining that with the weight and the thin handles, when you're trying to do ladders, for example, you have to really be good. It's not that it's not possible. It's just simply that this kind of knife is less accessible. It is harder to flip. Good to flip, but it's harder because of that aspect. Which brings us to something that flips better. Now, I'm not going to show it to you yet, but why does it flip better? Well, it flips slower. Feels like I'm flipping in like syrup or something, and when something flips slower, it has more flow. And that's something that I was going to make a video later, but basically the idea of slowing down. I feel like I flip too fast, and I want to be able to flip a little slower with a little bit more control so that you guys can actually see what's going on, and it just doesn't look so spastic. I find myself feeling like I'm not flipping fast, and then I watch my clips over and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I am flipping this thing like I have like super zoomer brain or something. But yeah, it flips slower, it's more smooth. The balance is slightly more handle bias, making it more consistent, more predictable. Like I was mentioning previously about the Tsunami, with its balance, the handle bias provides a little bit more reliability. Certain tricks will just kind of not be possible, or they'll always fall in a certain way. Like handle bias fans, they always fall like that, where you can catch the handle afterwards. Whereas the neutral, you have to have the timing and the feel for how much you're doing to have it land like that a lot more reliably. So this knife that I have is better because it flips slower, it's more smooth, more consistent. It has more grip, and it has G10. That's what gives it the more grip. You shouldn't see that part. And it's lighter, it's thicker, and it also has tapered handles. So it makes you ask, well, what is that guy? It's my Signus, my WZM Signus clone. That G10 aluminum. It's light, grippy, and I just recently started putting carbon honey thin instead of thick, and this guy actually surprised me by its sound. If I can do a sound test. So yeah, it doesn't fan as good, but it is lighter, thicker, tapered handles, more grip. So what's the problem? Well, as much as I like the Signus's design, I personally think that the Tsunami looks better. I think that this looks a lot cleaner, and the titanium allows you to do cooler looking visual things when I do eventually anodize this thing. But it's also more durable, right? The materials themselves are better. This guy, cheap materials. And it subsequently, because it weighs less, it has a subjective feeling of being cheap. I've flipped a lot of knives, and I've flipped some cheap knives. I have the Bally Plus Kraken, for example, and while that one is a cheap knife, it doesn't feel as light as this one, and that's just a process of the construction of this guy being a lot of a sandwich aluminum with a lot of milled out areas for the G10, which is also light, which basically leaves me with something that feels cheap. It feels like a toy. This is the only knife that I have that feels like a toy, but it flips so consistently. I'm able to hit a lot more tricks with this guy than I can with the Tsunami. It's more forgiving than my Tsunami. Easier, if you will. In the aiming space, it reminds me of switching to a low sensitivity versus having a high sensitivity, because with a high sensitivity, there's a theoretical higher skill cap. You can do more, but it's harder to control. Whereas with the, I don't know if I like the 1x zoom, it keeps unfocusing. Whereas with low sensitivity, it's harder to like turn around and flip and do flashy things. You still can, you have to work harder for those things, but it's more consistent and more reliable. Less flashy though, which makes you ask, you know, what do you want from your knife? And I'm torn here. I don't have an answer. And part of it, honestly, this guy is like $60. And I think I got it for like 55 off of a discount. But this guy's 55. This guy, I think the handles with the trainer blade is like what? 110, 120. This blade is 40. So it's like a $150 knife or something. And subjectively, I find myself looking at this guy, imagining that premium experience. This thing still flows. I love flipping this. It's just harder. And this guy is cheaper, but it arguably flips better. It has more aspects that a contemporary traditional balisong would have to make it an easier experience. But because of this subjective experience of like, well, I've paid less for it, so it shouldn't be as good. It just goes back to the question of price to performance ratio, and how, you know, spending more money on things to a certain degree is not going to give you a better product. It's going to just give you a different product. Like the law of diminishing returns, essentially, which is basically saying that, you know, at a smaller price point, like the 40, like the sub $100 range, every $10 makes a noticeable difference. You're getting a different product based on those $10. But as you get higher and higher up, when you climb the price ladder, the changes that you're going to get are going to be a lot smaller, a lot less noticeable. So instead of having to change from something that's like a $40 to a $50 knife, the next interval to create that much feeling of a change is like going from a 100 to a 150, or like a 120, or like going from a $120 knife to a $250 knife. Like, the jump in order to get like an actual feeling of change is a lot higher as a consequence of this law of diminishing returns. So I don't know, what should I flip? I mean, it's not like I'm gonna stop flipping the Tsunami, and I like bringing this guy out to beat, but I also beat this guy too. And I don't know, it feels like I should stick more commonly with just one, because I don't want to lose the feeling of practicing on one knife, but I also want something that feels premium. And I know you can say, well, I'll just get the Signus, the Thai Signus, but everyone says that this is like basically the exact same thing. It's just lighter and maybe a little bit more neutral, which kind of kills me because I like neutral, but this guy still feels handle bias. So I feel like if I got the Signus, it'd be too handle bias for my preferences, but it would feel more premium. So it just leaves me with this question that, you know, did I waste my money? Am I getting a product that isn't, it's so valuable. Like, the value you get on this guy is crazy. You get a knife that should be like $900, $750, something like that, and you get it for, you know, a seventh of its cost. Like, that's pretty astonishing. But at the same time, this guy is a lot more difficult to flip on. I mean, I'm curious to hear what you guys think, what you would flip if you were in this position. But yeah, this has been a really interesting development after getting the blade on this. Just coming back to this guy and being a little surprised how well this guy flips compared to basically everything else I have in my collection. So yeah, would you guys flip the Signus for the performance, but with something that feels less premium, a little cheap like a toy? Would you flip something that has weight to it, feels more premium, but is harder to flip on? Not that it's a bad flipper by any means, it's just a more difficult knife to do tricks on. So let's hear you guys' thoughts, and let's try to hit that scissor. Okay, well, that's the first try. That doesn't count. See, I almost got it there on the second try. Last try. There you go. It's been Pez Flips. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And I'll see you later. Bye.